I want to tell you about a conversation I had a few years ago. I was meeting with two clients on the same day. The first was a couple in their late 60s. They had about $800,000 saved. They'd worked hard their entire lives. Teacher and an engineer, disciplined savers. And they came into my office anxious, really anxious. They wanted to know if they had enough to retire. Could 800,000 last them 30 years? What if the market crashes? What if healthcare costs explode? What if they live to 95? Later that afternoon, I met with another couple similar age, but they had $15 million. And you know what? They weren't anxious at all. They were calm. They were confident. They had a clear plan. They knew exactly how much income their portfolio would generate. They knew their tax strategy. They knew their estate plan. They were enjoying retirement. Now here's what struck me. The difference between these two couples wasn't just the amount of money. Obviously 15 million is more than 800,000. But the real difference was how they approached retirement. The first couple was thinking about their portfolio as a number, a pile of money that would slowly shrink over time. The second couple was thinking about their wealth as a system, a machine designed to generate income, minimize taxes, and preserve capital across generations. And over the years, I've seen this pattern repeat itself hundreds of times. Wealthy retirees, the ones who have built and preserved significant wealth, they do three things consistently that most people don't do. And these three things have nothing to do with being born rich or getting lucky in the stock market. They're strategic decisions, they're ways of thinking, and they're completely accessible to anyone, regardless of how much money you have. That's what I want to talk about today. Three things wealthy retirees do that you probably don't. And more importantly, how you can start doing them, even if you're not wealthy yet. Thing number one, wealthy retirees think in cash flow, not portfolio value. Most people obsess over their portfolio balance. They check it constantly, they watch it go up and down, and they think about retirement in terms of that number. I have $1 million. I need 2 million. I'm halfway there. Or I retired with 1.5 million. It's down to 1.3. I'm losing ground. Wealthy retirees don't think this way. They almost never talk about their total portfolio value. Instead, they talk about income, monthly income, annual income. How much cash flow does the portfolio generate? And that's a fundamentally different question. Let me give you an example. Imagine you have $1 million in retirement savings. If you're thinking like most people, you're thinking, okay, I can withdraw 4% a year. That's $40,000. Adjusted for inflation over time, you're thinking about drawing down the principal. You're thinking about the portfolio as a depleting resource. But if you think like a wealthy retiree, you ask a different question. You ask, how do I structure this $1 million so that it generates $40,000 a year in income without touching the principal? And that changes everything. Suddenly you're not worried about the portfolio balance. You're focused on the income streams. Dividends, interest, rental income, distributions from funds. The goal is to live off the income, not the principal. Now let me be clear. This doesn't mean you never touch the principal. Sometimes you have to. But the mindset is different. The wealthy retiree is trying to build a portfolio that pays them every month, just like a paycheck. And if they can get close to covering their expenses with just the income, the principal can stay invested. It can keep growing. It becomes a legacy asset, not a consumption asset. This is how old wealth stays wealthy. They don't spend the goose. They live off the eggs, and they pass the goose to the next generation. So how do you actually implement this? How do you shift from portfolio thinking to cash flow thinking? First, you focus on income-producing assets, dividend-paying stocks, bonds, real estate investment trusts, anything that generates regular distributions. At BlackRock, when we build retirement portfolios for institutions, we don't just look at total return. We look at yield. We look at the predictability of income. We want to know if this client needs $10,000 a month, which assets in this portfolio will generate that $10,000 reliably. Second, you create what I call a retirement paycheck. You automate the income. You set up your accounts so that dividends, interest, and distributions flow into a single checking account every month. And that account is where you pay your bills from. It feels like a paycheck. It gives you the psychological comfort of regular income. And it prevents you from having to sell assets randomly throughout the year. Third, you separate essential expenses from discretionary expenses. Essential is housing, food, healthcare, utilities, things you must pay no matter what. Discretionary is travel, entertainment, gifts. Nice to have but flexible. The goal is to cover your essentials entirely with guaranteed income. Social Security, pension if you have one, and income from your portfolio. Once essentials are covered, you have freedom. You can take risks with the rest of your money. You can pursue growth because you know your basics are handled. I've seen retirees with relatively modest portfolios, 600,000, 700,000, who structure their assets this way and they sleep well at night. They're not constantly worried about market swings because they're not relying on selling shares to eat. They have income. They have cash flow. And that income keeps coming regardless of whether the stock market is up or down on any given day. This is the first major difference. Wealthy retirees think in cash flow. They build income-generating machines. And you can do the same thing regardless of your portfolio size. Thing number 2, wealthy retirees use a waterfall system, not a bucket system. Now, a lot of financial advisors talk about bucket strategies. You've probably heard of this. You divide your portfolio into 3 buckets. Bucket 1 is cash and short-term bonds for near-term expenses. Bucket 2 is balanced investments for medium-term needs. Bucket 3 is stocks for long-term growth. And you move money from bucket 3 to bucket 2 to bucket 1 over time. It's a decent framework. It works for a lot of people. But wealthy retirees do something more sophisticated. They use what I call a waterfall system. And the difference is important. A bucket system is about you, your timeline, your needs. You're managing your own money for your own retirement. A waterfall system is about generations. It's about structuring wealth so that it flows from one generation to the next with maximum tax efficiency and minimum disruption. Here's how it works. Imagine a series of pools arranged vertically. Water flows into the top pool. When that pool is full, it overflows into the second pool. When the second pool is full, it overflows into the third pool. And so on. The top pool is your spending money. The pools below are for your children, your grandchildren, charitable causes, whatever your priorities are. And the structure is designed so that each pool fills and overflows in a tax-efficient, legally protected way. At the top of the waterfall, you have your living trusts or your taxable accounts. This is the money you're actually using to live on. It's liquid, it's accessible, it generates the income we talked about in thing number 1. But here's the key. You don't just withdraw randomly. You follow a specific sequence designed to minimize taxes. For example, you might withdraw from taxable accounts first, taking long-term capital gains that are taxed at lower rates. Then you withdraw from tax-deferred accounts like traditional IRAs, managing the withdrawals to stay in a specific tax bracket. Then if you still need money, you tap Roth accounts, which are tax-free. This sequencing can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes over a 30-year retirement. Below your spending level, you have the next pool. This might be assets held in irrevocable trust for your children, or it might be family-limited partnerships, or donor-advised funds for charity. The point is, these assets are legally separated from your spending money. They're protected, and they're structured to pass to the next generation with minimal estate tax. And below that, you might have another level. Education trusts for grandchildren. Foundations, legacy investments that won't be touched for decades. Each level of the waterfall serves a different purpose and a different time horizon. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds complicated. This sounds like something only rich people can do. And yes, if you have $50 million, you're going to have a more complex waterfall structure. You'll have teams of lawyers and accountants helping you. But the principle applies at any wealth level. Even if you have $500,000, you can think in terms of waterfall logic. You can separate your spending money from your legacy money. You can be intentional about which accounts you withdraw from and in what order. You can set up simple trusts for your children. You can use beneficiary designations strategically. You don't need to be a billionaire to think multi-generationally. And here's why this matters. Most people treat retirement as the end of their financial life. They accumulate wealth, they retire, they spend it down, and whatever's left over goes to their heirs. There's no real structure. There's no intentionality. Wealthy retirees don't think this way. They think of retirement as a transition. They're transitioning from wealth accumulation to wealth stewardship. They're managing assets not just for themselves, but for the next generation and the generation after that. And this mindset changes behavior. It makes you more conservative with spending. It makes you more thoughtful about taxes. It makes you think about legacy. And the result is that wealth compounds across generations instead of being consumed in one. At BlackRock, when we manage money for family offices, this is exactly what we do. We build waterfall structures. We separate spending portfolios from legacy portfolios. We optimize tax efficiency across generations. And we help families preserve and grow wealth over 50, 70, 100 years. This is not magic. It's just structure. It's just thinking ahead. So ask yourself, do you have a bucket strategy or do you have a waterfall system? Are you just managing your own money for your own retirement? Or are you stewarding wealth for multiple generations? Because that shift in thinking, that's what separates wealthy retirees from everyone else. Thing number 3. Wealthy retirees work with a team, not a single advisor. Here's a mistake I see all the time. Someone retires with $1 million. They go to a financial advisor. The advisor manages their investments, and they think they're all set. They've got professional help, they're covered. But wealthy retirees don't work with a single advisor. They work with a team, and that team includes multiple specialists, each focused on a different aspect of their financial life. At a minimum, a wealthy retiree has 3 professionals working together. A fiduciary financial advisor who manages investments and provides strategic planning. A certified public accountant who handles tax preparation and tax strategy. And an estate planning attorney who drafts wills, trusts, and legal structures. And these 3 people talk to each other. They coordinate. They have quarterly meetings to review the overall plan. They make sure that the investment strategy aligns with the tax strategy, which aligns with the estate plan. Everything is integrated. Why does this matter? Because financial planning is not just about investments. It's about taxes. It's about legal structures. It's about insurance. It's about healthcare. It's about Social Security timing. It's about Medicare decisions. And no single advisor can be an expert in all of these areas. Let me give you a concrete example. Let's say you're 62 and you're deciding when to start taking Social Security. Your financial advisor might tell you to wait until 70 to maximize your monthly benefit. That's good investment advice. But your CPA might point out that if you delay Social Security, you'll need to withdraw more from your traditional IRA to cover living expenses, which pushes you into a higher tax bracket and triggers higher Medicare premiums. So from a tax perspective, maybe it makes sense to take Social Security earlier and do Roth conversions with the money you're not withdrawing from the IRA. That's a tax strategy. And then your estate attorney might point out that if you're doing Roth conversions, you should update your beneficiary designations, because Roth IRAs pass to heirs tax-free, which changes your estate plan. Do you see how this all connects? One decision affects everything. And if you only have one advisor, you're only seeing one piece of the puzzle. But if you have a team that coordinates, you make better decisions, you optimize across all dimensions, not just one. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds expensive. I can't afford a team of professionals. And yes, if you're paying each professional separately, it can add up. But here's the thing. You don't need to have meetings every month. You need maybe 2 or 3 coordinated sessions a year. A spring meeting to review the prior year's taxes and plan for the current year. A fall meeting to do year-end tax planning and adjust the investment strategy. And maybe one ad hoc meeting if something major changes. And the value of this coordination, it's enormous. I've seen families save $50,000 a year in taxes just by having their CPA and financial advisor work together on withdrawal sequencing and Roth conversion strategies. I've seen estate plans that reduced estate taxes by millions of dollars because the attorney and the advisor structured trusts properly. The cost of the team is nothing compared to the value they create. At BlackRock, when we work with high net worth clients, this is standard. We don't just manage the money. We coordinate with their tax advisors, their estate attorneys, their insurance specialists. We act as the quarterback. We make sure everyone is on the same page. And that's how wealth gets optimized. So here's my challenge to you. If you only have one advisor, you don't have a plan. You have an investment portfolio, but you don't have a comprehensive financial strategy. Start building your team. Find a fiduciary advisor who will coordinate with other professionals. Find a good CPA who understands retirement tax planning. Find an estate attorney who can draft the basic documents you need, and make sure they talk to each other at least once or twice a year. This is not just for the wealthy. This is for anyone who wants to optimize their financial life. This is for anyone who takes their retirement seriously. Let me bring this all together. 3 things wealthy retirees do that most people don't. They think in cash flow, not portfolio value. They use waterfall systems, not just bucket strategies. And they work with teams, not single advisors. And here's what's important. None of these things require you to be wealthy already. You don't need $10 million to think about cash flow. You don't need $50 million to structure a simple waterfall. You don't need $100 million to assemble a team of professionals. These are strategic choices. These are ways of thinking, and they're available to everyone. What I've learned in 40 years of managing money is that wealth is not just about how much you have. It's about how you think about what you have. It's about structure. It's about intentionality. It's about playing the long game. The couple with $800,000 who came into my office anxious. They weren't anxious because they didn't have enough money. They were anxious because they didn't have a system. They didn't have clarity. They were thinking about their retirement as a slow drawdown of a pile of money. And that's terrifying because you never know if the pile is big enough. But if they shifted their thinking, if they focused on building income streams, if they structured their withdrawals efficiently, if they assembled a small team to coordinate their plan, they could be just as confident as the couple with $15 million. Not because they're equally rich, but because they're equally structured. This is what I mean when I talk about democratizing wealth. For too long, the strategies of the wealthy have been locked behind private wealth management minimums. You had to have 5 million, 10 million just to get access to the good advice. But that's changing. The tools are available. The knowledge is available. And if you're willing to think like a wealthy retiree, If you're willing to adopt these three principles, you can achieve the same level of financial security, regardless of where you're starting from. I've spent my career helping people build and preserve wealth, and the most successful retirees I've worked with, the ones who sleep well at night, the ones who enjoy their retirement without anxiety, they all do these three things: cash flow thinking, waterfall structures, team-based planning. It's not complicated. It's not secret. It's just disciplined, intentional, long-term thinking. And that's available to you, starting today.